For some context here, I live in a pretty small town, maybe 5,000 people. I've only lived here for the past 5 years while doing university, and live a pretty dull life. Needless to say, nothing like this has ever really happened to me, and I'm not sure where else to post this. I live in a pretty small apartment, on the end of a dead-end street. I do have a car, but since my job, fast food, is only a 15-minute walk away, I usually walk to work, especially with how gas prices have gotten these days. As long as I've lived here, there's always been one house I've had to walk past. Just after getting off my dead-end street and turning onto another road, there's a gorgeous huge red house. I'd describe as mid-20th century, though it could be older. As I said, it's red, a dark maroon specifically. The paneling is old but well taken care of. It's got cream-colored siding, black shingles, 2 floors. The usual stuff you see in a small suburban town. I've always loved the character it has. The front of the house has a large porch, and the house itself is slightly obscured by a rather large tree beside the driveway. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. Every time I walk by the house, there's an old woman sitting on the porch on a wooden rocking chair. She genuinely seems like a kind soul, and when I first started my routine 3 or so years ago, she'd always wave at me. I got into the habit of waving back out of pointlessness at first, but it truly became something I looked forward to. There were a lot of times I wasn't listening to music on the walk, instead simply taking in the sound around me. On those days I could hear the wood on wood creaking, and she'd often say something to me. I think hello, but I could never really hear her. I'd always say hi back, of course. Eventually, about a year ago, we'd exchanged a few words, and I'd even walked on her side of the street, even though it meant crossing the road when I didn't have to. We'd exchanged the usual nice weather today stuff and all that, and while she wouldn't talk much back, I quite liked all of our interactions. Thinking back on it, I don't think there was a single time she wasn't out there. I want to think she liked it as much as me. I'm still not sure what her name is, but I could easily recognize her. Her gray hair was always up in a bun, and she was almost always wearing a gray wool shawl or cardigan to keep warm, even in the summer. But things changed about a week ago. I've gotten tired of living in a small, dingy apartment, and now that I'm out of university, and it looks like the local high school wants to hire me, I figured I should look for an actual house. I have enough saved up to at least. So for the past month, I've been keeping my eye on the local housing market for anything that suits me, though it's pretty barren right now. That is when I saw it. A listing for 27 Fairview Lane. A listing for the old lady's house. At first, I was a little sad to see that she was selling the place. Then, I actually opened the listing. The house was destroyed. Its windows were boarded up. Its walls were tarnished in black. Most of the siding and trim had fallen off. A large part of the ceiling had collapsed in. The tree was withered and dead, and the grass was brown and dry. The house I had admired every day for years was totally different. At first, I panicked. I was worried that something had happened, and almost immediately I sprinted full blast out of my apartment. I'm not sure why I was so moved. but I was genuinely fearful for her. I sprinted down my road, turned the corner, and stopped dead in my tracks. The house was the same as it had always been, beautiful and perfectly maintained. Was I wrong? Maybe they were old pictures, I thought. I didn't hesitate to pull my phone out of my pocket and begin to pull up the ad. And when I looked, the photos were time-stamped from last month. When I looked back, I saw her there, rocking as always, except this time was different. When our eyes locked, her smile, which had always been that of a kind old lady, slowly began to grow, creeping up to where the corners of her lips were almost intruding on her eye sockets. Her eyes had also shot wide open, and I could hear a faint giggling from her direction. Her rocking picked up pace, and she began to violently shoot back and forth, fast enough that any normal person's neck would have given out. The creak of the wood was almost deafening, and after a second or two she stopped. I swear to God I blinked, and when my eyes opened once more, she had vanished. The house had become the same nightmare I had seen in the ads, vicious and sinister in style. I stood there for a few minutes, dumbfounded. I have never been struck like a deer in the headlights before, but that truly scared me. Eventually, I just went back home. I wanted to investigate further, but something told me that if I stepped foot on that property, that bad things would happen. Ever since then, I've barely slept. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, her contorted smile, her violent rocking back and forth. Christ, it was like something out of a horror movie. After that, I didn't see her again. Not there anyway. My routine walks to work were walking past the abandoned shell of a house. In my downtime at work, since honestly I was too creeped out to do it at home, I would look for anything regarding the house. Yesterday, I learned why it looks the way it does. I guess it burned down in 2002 and the family never sold it. One person died in that fire, and the police ruled it as suicide by arson. I wasn't able to find out anything about who died there, but I think I know. After discovering this and walking home, I saw her again, not at the house. She was standing at the end of my street. When I saw her and that monstrous grin, I felt my heart stop. I ran as fast as I could back up to my apartment and locked the doors and the windows. I managed to convince myself that I imagined it in my sleep-deprived state, but now I know that I didn't. That's because I know she's here now. I didn't see her today, and it was a relatively normal day. I got home about 45 minutes ago, 9 p.m., and ever since I got home, I could feel her eyes on me. I began writing this in order to try and make sense of it. Music playing in my headphones. But I can still hear her. My left side is directly against a window, and I can hear her. She's outside my window right now. The giggling, the creaking of the old wood as she rocks back and forth, like some sort of possessed toy. She's right there, and I'm too scared to look. Oh yeah, I should mention, I live on the 4th floor.